Ladies, let's talk about something real. When a man hurts you, your first instinct might be to explain yourself, argue, cry, or chase answers. You want him to understand the pain he caused. You want him to see what he did wrong. But here's the truth: many women learn a little too late. When you react emotionally to a man who has hurt you, you often give him exactly what he expects. He already knows you care. He already assumes you'll come back to explain your feelings again and again. And when that pattern repeats, he never truly feels the weight of losing your presence. But something powerful happens when you change your response. Instead of reacting the way he expects, you move differently. You become calm where he expected chaos. You become distant where he expected attention. You become strong where he expected tears. That shift doesn't just protect your heart, it creates confusion in his mind. Because men understand patterns, and when the pattern changes, they start thinking, they start wondering. They start questioning what they may have lost. This is not about revenge, manipulation, or playing childish games. It's about emotional self-respect. It's about showing through your behavior that your peace, your dignity, and your value come first. When a woman learns to respond with strength instead of desperation, she changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. Suddenly, the man who thought he had control begins to feel uncertain. Suddenly, the man who thought you would always be there begins to realize that your presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. And sometimes that realization is the very thing that makes him reflect on how he treated you. When a man hurts you, the natural reaction for many women is to try to explain everything they feel. You want him to understand the depth of the pain. You want him to see the moment from your perspective. You replay the situation in your mind and think, if I can just explain this one more time, maybe he'll finally get it. So you talk. You send long messages. You try to calmly walk him through your feelings. You try to make him see what his words or actions did to your heart. But here is something many women slowly realize with experience. A man who hurt you usually already knows what he did. The issue is rarely that he doesn't understand. The issue is that he doesn't feel the full weight of it. When you continue explaining your pain to someone who already caused it, something subtle but powerful happens. Instead of feeling the loss of your presence, he remains comfortable because you are still there trying to make things work. Your explanations, your emotional honesty, your willingness to talk it through again and again while coming from a loving place can unintentionally remove the consequences of his behavior. He doesn't have to sit with the silence. He doesn't have to feel the distance. He doesn't have to wonder what you're thinking because you are telling him. Men often process emotional situations very differently than women do. Many men respond more strongly to absence than to explanation. Words can sometimes go in one ear and out the other, especially when a man believes the relationship will continue no matter what happens. But silence changes the emotional atmosphere completely. Silence creates space. And in that space, thoughts start to grow. Think about it this way. When you keep explaining your pain, the focus remains on convincing him to care. You are trying to bring him into your emotional world. But when you stop explaining and begin stepping back, the focus shifts. Now he has to come toward you if he wants to understand what happened. Now he has to sit with the reality that your energy is no longer easily available. And that shift can be very powerful. It's not about playing games or pretending you're not hurt. It's about understanding that constantly explaining your pain to someone who already witnessed it often drains your dignity more than it changes his behavior. Every time you repeat the same emotional conversation, hoping for a different response, you slowly give away your emotional power. You begin to feel like you're trying to convince someone to treat you with care, and love should never require that kind of convincing. When a woman finally reaches the point where she stops over-explaining, something interesting begins to happen. The dynamic changes. The man who was used to hearing long messages, emotional conversations, and repeated explanations suddenly notices the quiet. He notices that the familiar pattern has disappeared, and human nature is curious about change. When someone expects a certain reaction and doesn't receive it, their mind starts asking questions. Why is she so quiet? Is she really pulling away? Is she done with me? Those questions are powerful because they create reflection. Reflection is something that rarely happens when everything stays predictable. But when your silence replaces your explanations, the emotional environment becomes unpredictable for him. Suddenly he has space to think about the situation in a way he may never have before. Silence also protects your emotional health. Every time you revisit the pain and try to explain it again, you reopen the wound inside your heart. You relive the hurt. You reanalyze the moment. You go through the disappointment again and again. But stepping back allows you to breathe. It allows you to regain your balance. It reminds you that your value does not depend on someone else's ability to understand your feelings. A woman's silence is not weakness. In many cases, it is strength. It is the decision to stop begging for emotional awareness from someone who should already have it. It is the quiet confidence that says, I know what I felt and I know what I deserve. That type of energy changes how people perceive you. It shifts the focus away from pleading and towards self-respect. Another reason silence can be so impactful is that it forces a man to confront his own thoughts without your guidance. When you constantly explain things, you are essentially doing the emotional work for both of you. You are interpreting the situation, breaking down the feelings, and offering solutions. But when you step back, he has to process the situation himself. And sometimes that independent realization hits much harder than anything you could have said. This doesn't mean you should never communicate in a relationship. Healthy communication is important when both people are willing to listen and grow. But there is a difference between constructive conversation and repeatedly explaining your pain to someone who dismisses it. When your words are constantly ignored, silence becomes a form of self-protection. The truth is, people often appreciate things more when they feel the possibility of losing them. When your presence, your attention, and your emotional openness are always available no matter what happens, they can begin to feel ordinary. But when that energy becomes less accessible, its value suddenly becomes clearer. So instead of exhausting yourself trying to make someone understand your hurt, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and allow your absence to speak. Let the quiet create space for reflection. Let the distance remind him what your presence meant. And most importantly, let that silence reconnect you with your own sense of dignity. Because a woman who no longer feels the need to over-explain her pain is a woman who has rediscovered her strength. And that strength changes everything. When a woman is hurt in a relationship, one of the most common reactions is to pour even more energy into the man who caused the pain. It sounds strange, but it happens all the time. Instead of pulling back, many women try harder. They try to fix the misunderstanding, repair the emotional distance, or bring the relationship back to the way it used to feel. They send longer messages, ask deeper questions, try to be more understanding, more patient, more available. The intention behind this effort usually comes from love. You care about the connection, so you try to protect it. But what often happens in this situation is that the more energy you pour into him, the less he truly feels the weight of what he did. When your world begins to revolve around fixing his behavior or saving the relationship, you slowly move yourself out of the center of your own life. Your focus becomes his mood, his attention, his response, his decisions. You wake up thinking about what he might say, and you go to sleep wondering why he hasn't said it yet. Without realizing it, your emotional balance begins to depend on someone who is not giving you the same level of care. And the more this pattern continues, the more power he unconsciously holds over your emotional state. The real shift begins when a woman decides to redirect that energy back toward herself. Instead of spending all her mental space trying to understand him, she starts focusing on understanding her own needs again. Instead of chasing conversations that lead nowhere, she begins investing her time in things that strengthen her life. This change is not loud. It doesn't require dramatic announcements or emotional speeches. It is simply a quiet shift in priorities. Suddenly, your days are not built around waiting for his attention. Your energy starts going toward your goals, your passions, your friendships, your health, and your peace of mind. You begin rebuilding the parts of your life that may have slowly faded into the background while you were focused on the relationship. You rediscover the things that make you feel alive, confident, and complete on your own. And something interesting happens when that shift occurs. When a man is used to being the center of your emotional world, he becomes comfortable in that position. He knows that no matter how distant he becomes or how little effort he puts in, your attention will still orbit around him. But when your energy begins to move away from that pattern, he starts to notice the difference. The messages become less frequent. The emotional pressure disappears. The constant attempts to reconnect fade away. And that change can be deeply confusing for someone who is used to receiving so much focus from you. Confusion happens because the dynamic he understood is no longer there. The version of you he was familiar with was always trying to close the gap between you. But now the gap is not being chased anymore. Instead of reaching toward him, you are moving forward in your own direction. That independence creates a psychological shift that many men do not expect. When a woman becomes emotionally centered in her own life again, she carries herself differently. Her conversations change. Her tone changes. Her priorities become clearer. She is no longer operating from a place of fear of losing him. She is operating from a place of self-respect and emotional stability. And that kind of energy is very noticeable. Men often respond strongly when they sense that a woman's happiness is no longer dependent on them. Not because they want control, but because it forces them to reevaluate their place in her life. When your world revolved around him, he never had to question whether you would stay. But when your life becomes full and balanced again, he begins to realize that he is not the center of everything anymore. That realization can trigger curiosity, reflection, and sometimes even regret. He may start wondering what changed. He may start paying closer attention to your actions. The same independence that protects your heart can also make him realize the value of the connection he may have taken for granted. When your energy is no longer chasing him, he may begin moving closer on his own. But the most important part of this shift is not about confusing him or making him react. The real purpose is about restoring your emotional power. When you place your energy back into your own life, you regain control over your happiness. Your peace is no longer controlled by someone else's choices. Your sense of worth is no longer tied to someone else's attention. You start to remember who you were before the hurt happened. The confident woman who had dreams, passions, and a life that didn't revolve around someone else's approval. That version of you becomes stronger again with every day you invest in yourself. Redirecting your energy does not mean you stop caring. It simply means you stop abandoning yourself in the process of caring for someone else. It means you recognize that love should add to your life, not consume it entirely. A healthy relationship allows both people to grow individually while supporting each other emotionally. When a man sees a woman who is emotionally fulfilled on her own, it often changes how he views her. She is no longer someone who needs constant reassurance. She becomes someone who chooses to share her life rather than someone who depends on it. That difference creates a powerful sense of respect. And respect is one of the most important foundations of any lasting relationship. So when you shift your energy away from chasing his attention and back toward building your own happiness, you create a transformation that goes far beyond the relationship itself. You become stronger, calmer, and more grounded. Your confidence grows because it is no longer tied to someone else's actions. In the end, the woman who focuses on her own growth becomes the most powerful version of herself. And that kind of strength doesn't just change how a man sees you. It changes how you see yourself. One of the reactions many men expect after they hurt a woman is emotional intensity. They expect anger, tears, long arguments, repeated phone calls, and emotional confrontations. This expectation doesn't necessarily come from cruelty, it often comes from experience. Many relationships fall into patterns where conflict becomes loud, emotional, and dramatic. When a man does something wrong, he prepares himself for the emotional storm that might follow. He expects the raised voices, the emotional messages, the frustration pouring out all at once. In his mind, that reaction confirms something he already believes, that he still has a powerful effect on your emotions. When you respond exactly the way he expects, the situation stays inside that familiar pattern. The argument happens, emotions rise, both people say things they later regret, and eventually the storm settles. Sometimes apologies follow, sometimes they don't, but the cycle continues because the dynamic never truly changes. The emotional reaction becomes part of the routine. Over time, even hurtful situations can begin to feel predictable. But when you respond with calmness instead of drama, the entire script changes. Suddenly, the reaction he prepared for doesn't appear. Instead of chaos, there is composure. Instead of emotional explosions, there is quiet control. Instead of chasing answers through heated arguments, there is a calm distance that carries far more strength than anger ever could. Calmness in a painful moment is not about pretending you are not hurt. It is about refusing to let someone's actions control your emotional stability. When you stay composed, you are not suppressing your feelings, you are choosing how those feelings will be expressed. You are deciding that your dignity matters more than winning an argument or proving a point in the heat of the moment. This kind of calm response can be surprisingly powerful because it disrupts expectations. When someone expects an emotional reaction and does not receive it, they often become uncertain about how to interpret the situation. He might begin to question what you are really thinking. He might wonder whether you are pulling away emotionally. He might even feel a level of discomfort because the usual emotional signals he relies on are missing. That uncertainty can lead to deeper reflection. When there is no dramatic argument to distract from the situation, the focus shifts back to the behavior that caused the hurt in the first place. Without the noise of conflict, the reality of the situation becomes clearer. Silence and calmness leave space for thoughts that arguments often push aside. Another important aspect of calmness is the message it sends about your emotional strength. When a woman reacts with intense drama every time she is hurt, some people begin to focus more on the reaction than on the original problem. The conversation shifts away from what happened and toward how emotional the response was. But when you remain calm, the attention stays exactly where it belongs, on the behavior that caused the pain. Your calm presence communicates something very powerful without a single dramatic word. It shows that you are emotionally grounded. It shows that you are capable of handling difficult moments without losing control of yourself. It shows that your emotions are not something someone else can easily manipulate. For many men, seeing this kind of emotional stability in a woman can be deeply impactful. It changes how they perceive her strength. Instead of seeing someone who reacts out of desperation or fear of losing the relationship, they see someone who respects herself enough to maintain composure even in painful moments. That kind of self-control often commands more respect than emotional outbursts ever could. Calmness also protects your own peace. When you respond to hurt with immediate anger or emotional intensity, you often end up saying things that don't truly reflect your deeper feelings. In the heat of the moment, words can come out sharper than intended, and once they are spoken, they cannot be taken back. Arguments escalate quickly when both people react emotionally. What started as a conversation about hurt can turn into a battle of blame. But when you slow down and respond calmly, you give yourself time to think. You create space between the hurt you feel and the words you choose to express it. That space allows you to communicate more clearly and more effectively when you do decide to speak. Instead of reacting, you are responding with intention. This doesn't mean you become silent forever or ignore the issue completely. Healthy relationships require honest conversations about feelings and boundaries. However, those conversations become far more meaningful when they happen from a place of calm strength rather than emotional chaos. When a man sees that his actions did not provoke the dramatic reaction he expected, it often forces him to look at the situation differently. He may start to wonder if your patience is wearing thin. He may realize that your emotional investment in the conflict is not as intense as it once was. And that realization can be uncomfortable for someone who assumed your reactions would always follow the same pattern. Sometimes calmness speaks louder than any argument ever could. It carries a quiet message. Your peace of mind is more important than proving a point. Your dignity matters more than engaging in emotional battles. Your strength is not measured by how loudly you react, but by how steadily you hold yourself together when things become difficult. Over time, this calm approach changes the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. Instead of constant emotional highs and lows, there is a steadier energy. Instead of reacting to every moment of tension, you begin choosing which conversations are worth your time and which ones are not. That level of emotional control often shifts the balance of the relationship in a very subtle but meaningful way. A woman who remains calm where drama was expected creates a powerful contrast. She becomes unpredictable in the best possible way, not because she is playing games, but because she refuses to participate in unhealthy emotional patterns. Her composure becomes a quiet reminder that she values herself enough not to let anyone shake her emotional foundation. And in many cases, that calm strength leaves a deeper impression than any argument ever could. When someone hurts you repeatedly, one of the most common patterns that forms in relationships is that the person causing the pain begins to believe that nothing will truly change. They may apologize, they may promise to do better, or sometimes they may simply move on from the situation without addressing it at all. But deep down, they often feel secure in one assumption, that you will still be there. Your presence becomes something they expect rather than something they appreciate. It becomes familiar, predictable, and constant, even when their behavior does not always deserve that level of loyalty. This happens slowly, almost without either person noticing. A woman might stay because she believes in the relationship. She stays because she remembers the good moments, the promises, the connection they once shared. She hopes that if she shows enough patience and understanding, things will eventually return to the way they were. But when someone continues to hurt you without truly feeling the consequences of their actions, the cycle often repeats itself. The difficult truth is that people sometimes only understand the value of something when they experience life without it. As long as your presence remains constant no matter what happens, the urgency to change may never appear. Not because you lack value, but because your loyalty has made your presence feel guaranteed. Allowing someone to experience the space they created is not about punishment or revenge. It is about honesty. If their actions created emotional distance, then that distance deserves to exist. When a woman stops chasing closeness after being hurt and instead allows space to form naturally, she sends a powerful message without saying a word. She is acknowledging that actions have consequences and that her emotional well-being matters. Space can be uncomfortable, especially in relationships where one person has grown used to constant communication and reassurance. At first, the silence might feel strange for both people. You might wonder if you are doing the right thing. You might feel the urge to reach out just to bring things back to normal. That urge is natural because emotional attachment makes distance feel unfamiliar. But giving space allows something important to happen. It allows reality to settle in. When a man begins to notice the absence of your presence, he may start to reflect on what that presence meant. The daily messages, the attention, the emotional support, the warmth you brought into his life, these things may have felt ordinary when they were always available. But once they are no longer there in the same way, their absence becomes noticeable. Human beings are deeply influenced by contrast. We understand warmth better after experiencing cold. We appreciate light more after spending time in darkness. In relationships, the same principle applies. When someone who once filled your life with care and attention becomes distant, the difference can feel striking. For the man who hurt you, that difference may trigger questions he never asked before. He might begin wondering why things feel different now. He may replay moments in his mind, thinking about what led to this change. The space you allowed becomes a mirror where he can see the effects of his own actions. This kind of realization rarely happens in the middle of constant communication. When conversations continue every day and the connection remains active despite the hurt, there is little time for reflection. Life simply moves forward as usual. But when there is space, the mind becomes quieter, and in that quiet, thoughts often become clearer. At the same time, the space you create is not only for him, it is also for you. When you step back from someone who hurt you, you give yourself the opportunity to reconnect with your own emotions without the constant influence of the relationship. You begin to see the situation from a calmer perspective. You start to notice how you truly felt, not just how you tried to make the relationship work. Distance can bring clarity that emotional closeness sometimes hides. When you are deeply involved in trying to fix things, your focus often stays on saving the relationship at any cost. But when you step back, you gain the ability to evaluate whether the relationship was truly meeting your needs in the first place. This period of space can become a time of personal growth. You rediscover your independence, your interests, and the parts of yourself that may have been overshadowed by the relationship. You rebuild your sense of balance. Instead of constantly reacting to someone else's behavior, you begin focusing on what brings you peace and fulfillment. Ironically, this is often the moment when the person who hurt you starts paying closer attention. When your energy is no longer directed toward them, they may begin to notice the shift. They may wonder whether you are moving forward without them. The comfort they once felt in your constant presence disappears, and uncertainty replaces it. Uncertainty can lead to reflection, and reflection can sometimes lead to change. When someone begins to feel the possibility of losing a connection they once took for granted, they may start reevaluating their behavior. They may recognize the value of what they had in ways they never did before. However, the most important part of allowing space is not whether it changes the other person. The real purpose is to protect your dignity and emotional health. It is about recognizing that you deserve a relationship where your presence is appreciated, not assumed. By allowing someone to experience the space their actions created, you are choosing self-respect over desperation. You are showing that your time, your attention, and your emotional energy are valuable. And those things should never be given endlessly to someone who does not treat them with care. Sometimes that space leads to renewed understanding and growth within the relationship. Other times it reveals that the connection was not as strong as you once believed. Either way, the clarity that comes from distance can guide you toward healthier choices. A woman who understands the power of space learns that love should never require her to chase someone who keeps walking away. She realizes that the right person will recognize her value without needing to lose her first. And if someone does need that loss to understand what they had, then the space you created has already done its job. Because sometimes the strongest message a woman can send is not through words or arguments, but through the quiet courage of stepping back and allowing someone to feel life without her presence.